we have had moments in which, and I talk about this with her a lot, about what it's going to be like for me when I do transition and we are together again on the same side of the veil. She has said to me, it's more beautiful than you can imagine now. I've already experienced it, and it is everything that you hope and believe it will be.
I'd like to welcome to the show Stephen Simon. How you doing, Stephen?
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, as Jim Carrey would say.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much for coming on the show, my friend. We had a wonderful conversation about your filmmaking history in my other show, and I found out about your book, and it's like, well, I have to do it. I do this other show that might be a good fit for what you're talking about in your book.
You bet.
But I wanted to, kind of give the audience a little bit background about you and where you come from. So what drew you into the film industry and the insanity that is the film industry, and what kind of brought you into that world?
Sure. So I was very, very, very lucky. I was born into it. My father, my birth father, was a producer and a director in the 1940s, and also the head of production at Columbia Studios at the end of the 40s. He made movies with Red Skelton and Abbott and Costello and a bunch of other major stars. He was a wonderful director and a wonderful producer. Unfortunately, he died when I was very young. It was just before my 5th birthday, but my mother remarried another film producer who made movies at MGM with a bunch of other stars. So I was really born into the business. I was very fortunate about that. As far as my spirituality and how it all began, because it dovetails into my career, when I was young, and I don't remember exactly how old I was probably 7 years old, 8 years old. It was a couple of years after my dad died. We had moved into a new home, and I kept telling my mother and my stepfather that there is a man in my wall every night. And they were like, what? And I was like, there's a man in my wall. Well, does it scare you? No, it doesn't scare me at all. He's really, really nice. And I think he's there to protect me. Well, it took me a long time to realize that that was the spirit of my dad, who was indeed there. But it kind of got me going on a path where when I became a bit older, when I got into my teenage years and into my 20s, my favorite movies were like It's a Wonderful Life and Lost Horizons and The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, films like that had what I consider to be a spiritual content to them. I very briefly after college, I went to law school. I became a lawyer for a very short period of time, knowing that I would never be in the industry. I practiced for about a year and a half, never got it right, and had a big celebration when all the malpractice insurance deadlines had passed, and I realized that nobody could sue me. I was not a really good lawyer, but I knew I was going to get into the film industry. I went into a bookstore in 1975 and was sold a book called Bid Time Return. And I took it home, I read it that night, and I thought, that's it, I got to get into the film industry. So I went to Ray Stark. For people that were not familiar with who Ray was a very, very successful, powerful film producer for many, many years in the industry. He made Funny Girl, The Way We Were, Annie, a bunch of other terrific films. And he was my father's protege, my birth father's protege. So I grew up around Ray. Again, as I said, I got into this industry through connections, and I was very, very fortunate to do that. I begged Ray for a job. He thought my mother, who was a dear friend of his, would kill him because she was going to take her son, the Jewish lawyer, out of the law business and put him in the film industry. But I convinced him to do it. The very first thing I did was got on the phone, found out who the agent for the writer who wrote the book, Richard Matheson, was. I met him for lunch. And I told him I had no idea what it was like to produce a film except from afar. I was going to learn, and that would be my first film if he would give me a chance with it and give me an option. And he agreed. We shook hands. And 3 years later, that became Somewhere in Time. That began my relationship with Richard. And when we were prepping Somewhere in Time, Richard gave me the galleys for his next novel, which was What Dreams May Come. And it took me 3 years to get Somewhere in Time made. It took me 20 years to get What Dreams May Come made. That is quite a journey. We could actually spend an entire interview talking about how that came about and how it didn't over the years. But it took a long time. I finally got that film put together. And my life is really, in the film industry, has really been about trying to make spiritual movies and actually pushing the edge, I think, with them. You know, Somewhere in Time, when it first came out, was a complete bomb. It bombed with the critics. It bombed at the box office. It was gone after 3 weeks. Broke my heart. I thought we'd made a really beautiful and timeless love story. It took a while for it to catch on. There was a guy in LA named Jerry Harvey who programmed the Z Channel, which was the first like pay-per-view kind of channel in LA. And he happened to love Somewhere in Time. And he only ran 2 movies a night in the beginning. And he used to run this twice, at 8 o'clock and at 10 o'clock. HBO bought it when they just started out because they didn't buy hit films. They couldn't afford it. And the film found its way into people's hearts. And now it's become quite a big cult film. Universal has sold an awful lot of DVDs and a lot of downloads with it. And every year now at the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island, where we shot that, they have a Somewhere in Time weekend. And people come dressed in 1912 costumes, and they do trivia contests. Unfortunately, we got to take our family to a couple of those. It's very meaningful to me. I knew after What Dreams May Come that I needed to get out of LA. I became friends with a wonderful man named Neil Donald Walsh, who wrote the Conversations with God books. Neil and I have kind of always considered each other since we met 20 some odd years ago to be brothers from another mother. And at one point, I was living in LA, it was 2001, and Neil said to me, "You have to write a book. You got to write a book about spiritual cinema because that's your life." And I'm like, "Neil, you're the book writer. I'm not." We kept arguing. And finally, one day he said, "Stephen, you're going to write the damn book. Do you want to argue with my source?" No, sir. So I wrote the book, which was my first book, called Mystical Movie Messages That Inspire Our World. That was the drop line. The title of the book is The Force is With You. And that got me into the whole idea of going out and talking about spirituality, which frankly, Alex, is why I got into the film industry. You know, looking back on my career now, I know that's one of the major reasons that I came into this life, was to get these films made. As I said, Somewhere in Time bombed. What Dreams May Come did not bomb. What Dreams May Come did almost $90 million, $95 million worldwide, but it lost money because it was very expensive. And it did push the envelope. And that was the point. It was not to make a big commercial mainstream movie. Neither Somewhere in Time nor What Dreams May Come are big mainstream movies. You know, I went on to make the film version of Conversations with God, which is also not a mainstream movie, a little movie called Indigo, which is not a mainstream movie, but it was movies for an audience that I knew was there, that I believe is underserved and is still underserved. Mm-hmm. And it was not meant to, those movies are not meant to convert anybody. They're meant to make people feel better about being human. Dreams, I know, is quite a journey, and it's a dramatic journey. I one time gave a kind of an elevator pitch about What Dreams May Come to somebody, and no one will ever make that movie. I mean, that's just way too tough. It's way too difficult. So that went on in my life. In 2018, I had been married for quite a while. I found the love of my life, my soulmate, my twin flame. And one morning I came home from the gym, January 3rd, 2018, and found that she had transitioned in her sleep. She was only 54, and it was a shock, which sent me into a tailspin. I know that there are people out there who have had these experiences, much worse experiences than that. And I know what people go through when you go through that kind of grief. I totally fell apart, frankly, for almost 2 years. It was really, really difficult for me. We had had a lot of conversations, Lauren and I. Lauren was and still is kind of a incredible intuitive and had the same spiritual beliefs. And we actually talked about, one night she said to me, honey, we got to figure out what we want our afterlife experience to be together. And, and she went into a channeling trance where we started talking about it, laying things out in detail. She knew, I think, looking back on it, that something was coming in her life. About 6 weeks after she transitioned, she came through to me. We had talked about it a lot. It was not something that I was shocked by. I was so relieved that she came through to me because it had been 6 weeks. And even though that's a very short period of time, it was just desperately important for that connection to happen. That then grew into a lot of conversations, which grew into a book that we wrote together called What Dreams Have Come, which we published in about 2 years ago. It's available exclusively on Amazon. We self-published it. I knew there was no way I was ever going to get a publisher to publish a book written with my wife who had transitioned before. And we wrote the book for people, again, who have been through this experience, who are going through this experience, and who have connections with loved ones on the other side. There are a whole bunch of Facebook groups that actually are entirely focused on that. One in particular, Love After Life, which is a private one that is only dedicated to people who are still communicating with the loves of their lives, husbands, wives, children, parents, grandparents, etc. And again, we wrote this book for people who are having this experience, who have been afraid to talk about it because they're afraid that people will think they're crazy. I went past crazy decades ago, so none of that really phases me whatsoever. That's what my life and my career have been about. And that's really the journey of film and the journey of spirituality and our book. And I hope, we both hope, Lauren and I both hope, that it will bring comfort to people who are afraid to talk about it because people will look at them, askew, and people look at me askew all the time when I talk about this. There are other people who welcome it, but we really wrote this to encourage people who are having this experience, are trying to have this experience, that you're not alone. And when I look back on my life and on my career, it's obvious that this had to happen. If you look at Somewhere in Time and What Dreams May Come and Conversations with God and Indigo, and also the Spiritual Cinema Circle, which we operated for 16 years, this was where I was going in my life. And that, I was going to say in a nutshell, but it's a very big nutshell. That's the journey.
Well, let's go back and unpack that a little bit, because there's a lot that you just.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's great for me to be able to do that because now the rest of the interview is up to you. You can tell me where we're going to go, and I will go right with you.
So I just want to, before we get into Lauren and the book, there's something really special about What Dreams May Come, and it's I've spoken to you as well. That is one of my favorite films of all time, and it's such a powerful film that, as well as Somewhere in Time, has found its audience over time, and especially because of Robin Williams, who was the star of it, and how he transitioned, how he passed, and the kind of two storylines between Robin's life and the movie's life, and that movie would never have been made without Robin. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, Robin was the one who, Robin at that time could greenlight anything he wanted to. He just tells the studio, "I want to do this movie." It gets done. I had the creators of August Rushed on as well, and which is another wonderful, wonderful film that has a spiritual twist to it without question. No one would do it until Robin said, "I'll do it." And he was a co-star in that. He wasn't even the main stars of that, and they'd let him do it. So he had a lot of power. And can you, when you spoke to Robin, what about the story? Because it was unlike anything he had done. I think he did a movie called Being Human, if I remember, about multiple past lives.
Yes.
Funny. There was funny stuff, like he was a caveman and he was
a terrific Scottish director whose name doesn't come to mind right now, that made that film. That's a wonderful movie.
Right, exactly. So he dabbled in it a little bit. But what was it when you sat down and met with him? What was that meeting like? In this, because I'm assuming it was funny, but there was some sort of spirituality talk about at that time.
Well, it's interesting. You're right about Robin being the one that got the film ultimately greenlit, because the film we knew was going to be very expensive with all of the visual effects. And I'm very proud that the guys who actually did those visual effects won the Academy Award for it in 1999, which was the year after it was released. We knew it was going to be an expensive movie, and we knew we needed to have a major star. It was offered to Robin. We had not heard a response. And I remember the director, an incredible, wonderful director from New Zealand named Vincent Ward. We were told that Robin read it and wanted to meet with us. And we went to San Francisco and we met with him, hoping that he was going to say yes. And he walked into the room and said hello. And he said, "Guys, I just want to tell you something. Not only am I going to star in this movie, this may shake you up a little bit, but I'm going to play all the parts. It's going to make it much easier for you to cast the rest of the movie. It's all going to be me." Which was a wonderful way of getting the meeting started. I truly believe that the movie really hit Robin's heart in his own feeling for his wife and his children. As with most comic actors, Robin actually off screen in real moments was a very serious guy, an incredibly well-read, sophisticated, cultured man who had a voluminous library, was very into art. I mean, Robin was a very, very, very smart guy and a very deep guy. And I think it hit him on that level that it would be such a unique love story that he wanted to be a part of it.
And it definitely was. And it touches on, if people who are listening to this or watching this have not seen that movie, please go rent it, buy it. It's one of those rare spiritual movies that has a budget. I mean, they don't exist. I mean, you're talking about, hey, I'm going to go down to the bits of hell to save my wife. Rolls off the tongue, not easy to film.
No, and it involves suicide. It involves children dying. I mean, it is a challenging project, and it had challenges from the book level. We were very fortunate to get Ron Bass to write the screenplay for it. He actually rewrote Richard's screenplay, which Richard was incredibly kind with me about it. One point I realized that because of what the film was going to be, that we were going to need major stars. And I knew I needed a major screenwriter who wrote roles for people like Robin and could get major movie stars. And I went to Richard and I said, "Look, I've tried. I can't get the script that we developed made. I want to get Ron Bass, who was a friend of mine, to rewrite it, but I want your permission." And he said, "Absolutely, if that's what you think you need to do." That's the kind of man that Richard Matheson was, one of the greatest people in my life and just an extraordinary man. Ron solved the issues in the book. In the book, when Annie takes her own life because of her grief over Chris Robin's death, their children are still alive. And we knew from day one that we could not do that. You can't create sympathy for a character who takes her own life and leaves two children orphans.
Right.
And we knew we had to fix it. And Ron figured out how to fix it. And people who have seen the film know how he fixed it. And he did an absolutely extraordinary job. That was an incredible journey. I tried so many directors over the years. We almost got the film done at 20th Century Fox in the mid 80s. A lot of things happened. It didn't happen. There were a couple of years where it just was so painful to me that I hadn't been able to get it done, that I put it on the shelf for a while, but I always knew that I would get back to it. And I'm so glad that you've had that response to it, because it is a deeply meaningful movie to me as well. And again, a terrific love story with an amazing barrier between the lovers. You know, that's the key to love stories is the obstacles that the lovers have to overcome to be together, starting with Romeo and Juliet and probably before. Well, one's here and the other one's on the other side of the veil. That's a pretty formidable obstacle. And I'm really, really proud of the film. And I'm really proud of Vincent Ward, who did such a fantastic job of making a truly impossible movie to put on screen. There were some directors, I won't mention them, but there are some directors over the years who said to me, Stephen, this is fabulous. I love this book. I'd love to be able to do it with you. I don't know how. I just don't know how to put this on screen. And these are pretty extraordinary directors. Well, Vincent knew how.
And the thing is, too, if it would have tried to get done in mid 80s, the technology wasn't there to make that film.
The technology wasn't there until we actually did the film. And I remember when Vincent came to me and he said, all right, I know how to do this now. I absolutely know how to do this. The wife in the movie, Annie, is going to be a painter. And she also works in a museum, in an art museum. She curates an art museum. So he and she are very into paintings, her paintings and other ones, so that when Robin gets to the afterlife, he is going to be in a wet oil painting. Oh. And that is what the afterlife is going to look like. It'll be dazzling. It'll be beautiful. He will be the only solid figure moving around in a world of wet paint.
Oh God! And it's so
I'll never
beautiful.
Forget this breakfast. I'll never forget this breakfast, because I said to him, "That's mind-boggling. Can we do that?" And Vincent was, "Yeah, of course we can do that." And I said, "You know how?" And he said, "Hell no." But
it was
figure it out.
It was barely, from my understanding of visual effects at that time, they barely could get it made in the way that they got. Like, the technology was right on the edge of breaking. If you would attempt to do it today, it'd be easier because there's more power and there's more technology, yes, but yet very challenging. There's a reason why you haven't seen that technique ever again.
Yeah, I mean, it's really expensive.
Even if you had a Marvel budget, it's still complicated, and it is a remarkable feat, to say that. And that was the thing that sold that trailer. I mean, when you see him running around in a wet oil painting and the dog is jumping around, and you're just like, how the hell did they do that? It's such a beautiful film. But I just wanted to kind of dig into that. And you also said Ron Bass, who was a little screenwriter. He wrote a couple movies, right? A couple other movies.
Oh yeah, Ron.
Didn't he win that little yellow guy the Oscar at one point?
I'm sorry, did he what?
Did he ever win that little guy, the little statue, the Oscar thing?
Oh yeah, yes, for a kind of an unknown movie called Rain Man.
Right.
Ron has had a lot of movies made. I think maybe 30 or 40.
And that's a lot in Hollywood. Even at that level, it's a lot.
And he's still doing it. You know, he's an extraordinary guy and a fantastic writer. And again, when you get a film put together like Dreams, a whole bunch of things have to happen at the right time. Right. And the fact that Ron agreed to do it when we had pitched it to MGM and we're walking out of the office, having pitched it and having them tell us we're going to develop this thing, which was the end of at that point, about 16 or 17 years of me being with it, we walked out of the office, and as we were leaving, there was one other guy waiting for a meeting with an executive. What do you call that? The water bottle tour?
Yeah, the water bottle tour. When you go around to all the offices and would you like a water? And they just give you water bottles.
So I think he was on the water bottle tour. But I happened to ask Ron, who knew everybody in Hollywood. I said, "Who is that guy?" And he said, "That's a director from New Zealand named Vincent Ward." And a year later, Vincent became the director. So I think the universe said, "Hey, Stephen, you are not all that bright, and you sure aren't that quick. But your heart's in the right place. We're going to give you a break. Here's your movie. Go try not to screw it up."
Now, when you mentioned earlier that when you were younger, you saw your father in your room. Did that ever happen again after those sightings with your father? Did you have that ability to see people, or was it just specifically your father at that time?
No, and I didn't see him.
You felt him.
I sensed him. Yeah, I felt him. I did not see him. And no, and as much as I have tried, I cannot see Lauren. I hear her in my heart. As we talk about in the book, this is a very interesting thing. And people who have gone through it, it's one of those things that unless you experience it, it's really hard to put it into words, because the words don't fit this experience all that well. We don't have the proper words. But when Lauren first came through to me, people ask me, "Did you hear her voice?" My answer is, through my ears, no, because she was cremated. Her body does not exist on this plane anymore. So I could not have heard that voice, but through my ears. But in my heart, I heard it, and I still hear it. She's here with me this morning, and I know when she's around, there's something that happens that I have not described to people, which I'm not going to, because it's very private with us and it's private. Everybody has their own tell with this type of thing, but I know when she's present. And we talk really literally every day. And I know that that's very difficult for a lot of people to talk about. I've had people say to me, "Stephen, how can you be sure that you're not just making this up because you were so traumatized by Lauren's transition that you had to create something? How do you know that's not true?" And I try to answer it in the most honest way I can, which is that if I'm responding from my brain, I have to say that, yes, there's got to be a 1% chance that I'm making all this up. I can't 100% up here logically explain that for sure it's real. In my heart, I'm 1,000,000% sure. And because of all of the other people that are going through it, I know this is real for us. I know because of the conversations that Lauren and I have had and continue to have, that it is her and that it's not me. One of the principal ones is that when Lauren was physical, we had a lot of laughter at my expense. I tend to be a bit eccentric in certain things. I just did a wedding ceremony for one of our daughters. I officiated at it, and she gave me some rules. And the first rule was no dad jokes. Okay, no dad jokes. So anyway, we had a lot of fun laughing at me, and Lauren still has a lot of fun laughing at me. And I know when she's doing it, and it's an extraordinary experience. The veil has thinned. There are a lot of different things that, as you know, are going on in the evolution of our humanity. And this is one of them, that we can have these communications through the veil. I know that that is very difficult for some people to accept. And I respect that, but I know that it's true for me. And I know it's true for literally millions of other people around the planet.
So take me to the moment when it first happened. What was that like? What was the feeling you had that you said, "Oh, this is not just my brain talking to myself. I can feel it." And I understand what you mean by "I feel," because the brain can't wrap its head around many things that happen experiences, and I've had the pleasure of talking to channelers and psychics and mediums and near-death experiencers. It's really difficult for the brain to wrap their head around something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Logically.
Well, we talk about this in the book, but I will tell you right now how it happened. It was 6 weeks after she had transitioned. I was watching television one night. I used to record a bunch of different shows. I was in a deep state of shock. And I was also really depressed because we had not yet been able to make that contact, or I had not heard her yet. So I was watching the end of a particular show, and all of a sudden I felt Lauren say to me, "Honey, watch the end credits." And I was like, "What? What?" And she said, "Honey, watch the end credits." Now, I never do that with television shows. As soon as the show's over, I don't like to see previews for the next week. I always turn it off. And I was watching this one show, and she said, "Watch the credits." So I was like, okay. So the last commercial is over, and they show the credits, and over the credits they played the song, "Hey girl, things are going to get easier, things are going to get better. Someday we'll walk in the rays of a beautiful sun." And that had been one of our favorite songs. And as soon as I heard, "When your head is much lighter, we'll walk in the rays of a beautiful sun," I knew it was Lauren. And she waited until that time, I think, or maybe that was the first time she could have gotten through. I don't know. But I know she wanted to be in touch with me in such a way that I would know it was her. And that's how it began.
Did you, when you heard her voice in your mind, was it her voice or was it your voice through her?
No, her.
So it was like her tone, her everything in your head.
But it wasn't her voice. See that, not through my ears.
No. In your mind.
Oh, absolutely. It was her voice. And it is her voice, and it is her laugh, which is a very distinct laugh that she has. It is absolutely, I do hear that voice, but not through my ears. I hear it in my heart. And I know that's a very difficult concept for a lot of people to grasp, but it's the only way I can explain it.
Now, when you guys so that was the very first communication. Then the next, at that point, did the conversation continue, or was it just like end of credits and nothing?
Oh, no. The conversation continued. And I was extremely emotional. I know I cried like a baby. I was so relieved that it had happened because we had talked about it happening so much. And it began a regular, literally daily interaction between the two of us. And after a day or so, I decided for my own purposes that I wanted to make notes of our conversations, what I said, what she said, etc., because I wanted to have it to refer to later on. I was not in good shape emotionally in any way. This began a long climb back to being able to actually live again. People who have had these grief experiences know that if somebody says, "Well, you just, eventually you'll get over it," those people do not understand what grief is. That kind of grief you do not get over. You absolutely do not get over it. It is a part of your life for the rest of your life. What you do learn is how to live with it. And it changes in intensity, it changes in frequency, and it changes in the way you respond to it. I can go a week, 2 weeks without having then I couldn't go more than 20 minutes without crying or something like that. I remember one night calling my friend Neil, and I was crying so hard that I literally couldn't speak. And God bless Neil. He's just the most extraordinary man and an extraordinary friend. And he just waited me out and just said, "Breathe, buddy, breathe." And when I could finally speak, I said to him, "Neil, I'm out of my mind with grief." And he had such a great typical Neil response. He's like, good. Good. I'm glad to hear that. You need to be out of your mind and in your heart because your mind doesn't understand this. And that was really the basis of Lauren and I having these conversations. So anyway, I wound up doing this every day and writing what she would say and what I would say, et cetera. This was in February, this started, of 2018. In September of that year, and I was still making these notes, I went to Ashland, Oregon, where I had lived for a few years, where Neil lives, to see one of our daughters who lived there and to see Neil. And I had dinner with Neil and his wonderful wife, Em, one night at a restaurant we used to go to. And we discussed this in the book. I was facing the windows of the restaurant. It had not rained in Southern Oregon in several months at this point. I have the date in the book, and I think it was September 28th of 2018. I don't remember it right now, but I think it was around that time. It had not rained in months. That's an important story. There'd been quite a drought down there. So we started talking, and Neil said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing fine. I'm making a lot of notes." For the people who have read Conversations with God, they know that that's how Neil started writing Conversations with God. He started making notes for himself of the conversations that he was having with God, and he started writing them down. And I said, it's kind of eerie, but it's kind of like what you're doing. I'm just doing it for myself. And he kind of looked at me a little strange, and I said, oh, I think maybe we're supposed to write this book. At that stage, and I welcome people to check the weather in Ashland, Oregon on that date. Lightning strikes outside the window, lit up the whole night. And everyone turned around to look at it. There was thunder, and Neil smiled and he said, "I know the title of the book, Another Lightning Strike." And I said, "What?" He said, "You're going to call it What Dreams Have Come." Another lightning strike. And I said, "So Lauren and I are going to write this together, right? Another lightning strike." And after, I think there was maybe one more, we knew we weren't in Kansas anymore. And I knew I had to go home after that trip and write the book. And when I came home, Lauren and I talked about it, and she said, "Yes, we're going to do it." And we wrote the book. I gave it to a dear friend of mine to read before we published it. One, because she's the best proofreader I've ever been around, and two, because she's a deeply spiritual woman who really knew Lauren, and I wanted to get her take on it. And for people who have seen the book, or if you do read the book, all of the things that Lauren says in the book are in a different font than the rest of the book, and that was my dear friend Anna's idea, to do it that way. And we put the book out there 2 years ago this month, actually, 2 years ago in October. We put the book out there, and I want to say to people, before I forget, if you've had an experience like this, or if you are having an experience like this, and you want to share it with me, my email is Stephen, STEPHEN, at whatdreamshavecome.com. Stephen at whatdreamshavecome.com. I want to assure you that I am the only one that has access to that email account. I don't have an assistant, okay? Someone has said, "Well, I'm sure your assistant's reading it." Well, the assistant doesn't exist. And if it's not Lauren, because if it was an assistant, it would be me, not her. Right. And I promise you, I will read it, and I promise you, I will respond to you. You need to give me a little bit of time, depending on when I get it, because sometimes I get a lot of these at once, and sometimes I'll go a week or two without getting any. But I will respond to you, because I want people to have the freedom to discuss this with somebody else who gets it. So please feel free to be in touch with me.
Thank you so much for that generosity of putting yourself out there like that to help people, Stephen. So I have to ask, when you start talking to Lauren, I'm assuming the conversations are fun and exciting, but did she explain to you what her transition was like, what the other side is like, anything that you can bring back to us here, because we're going through some stuff right now. So any little thing that you can throw our way might be able to
Well,
help somebody.
I'll tell you, I have, best way for me to describe this. Lauren has parameters that she needs to work within, because there are things about her existence now that are really kind of beyond our human
Sure.
ability to be able to grok. And so there is a limitation on what she can share with me. She shares with me quite a lot. The life that we designed and the things that we said we were going to do, she has been in the process of putting together and has assured me that they are waiting for when I do cross over. Lauren did share with me, and so did somebody else very close to Lauren, when she transitioned, and she actually, and I'm going to use these words, but they're probably not correct. When she came to consciousness on the other side, she was certain for a while that she was still asleep, that she was dreaming. And it took her a while to acclimate to the fact that she had actually crossed over. So it took a while for her to be able to do that. She got in touch with me as soon as she could, because she knew that I was suffering and missing her. And so she got to me as quickly as she could. I know she had to go through a certain amount of review of her own life, of what her life had been like. And again, when I say that takes time, because time does not exist on the other side, it's a little difficult to actually translate that into what that experience really is like. We have had moments in which, and I talk about this with her a lot, about what it's going to be like for me when I do transition and we are together again, on the same side of the veil. She has said to me, it's more beautiful than you can imagine now. I've already experienced it, and it is everything that you hope and believe it will be. Now, that's because time is not the same thing on the other side of the veil. I also know that she has been in touch with a couple of our kids. They're all adult kids. The youngest, the 8 kids are between 26 and 46. I know she has been in touch with a couple of them who are open to it. A couple of them are not as open to it. And yes, we do. We laugh. There are times that I cry with her, because I still, even though I'm incredibly grateful that she is around me, I miss us physically being together.
True.
And people automatically think that I'm talking about sex, which I'm actually not. I'm talking about hugging her. We used to meet in the kitchen in our house. She worked from home and I worked from home. We used to meet in the kitchen of our house 3 times a day and hug for a while. I miss our hugs. I miss holding hands with her. I miss our laughter together. We basically did not have a lot of mutual friends that we saw. We had our family, and we really just spent we were together 24/7. I still miss that, and I will always miss that. There's a lyric from a song that always plays for me when I talk about this. I will find my way back into your arms. I survive for your love. And in many ways, I do feel that. And I know that people who have had these experiences over a long period of time, I know that they understand that as well. And there are people that have had a heck of a lot more difficult experiences than me, and then that I've had with people that have had long-term illnesses, and you need to watch the love of your life fade away. People have gone through this with children. Some have been in touch with me, losing a child, which is something that is so horrific. I can't even imagine how people survive it. Right. It is, yes, we laugh, we talk, I also cry. Um, our kids say dad cries at card tricks. And and there's a great deal of truth in that. But she's my forever love, and we know we've been together over a whole bunch of different lifetimes, and that it all kind of built to this lifetime about us being conscious of all that. So anyway, there's a lot of that in the book, and I hope that people, if you're looking for this kind of comfort, I hope people will try that. I hope they'll check it out, because I think it will give you some comfort.
So I have to ask you, Stephen, there's so many of us on the planet who have loved ones, with deep loved ones, either parents or lovers or children, or even deep friendships, who have these loves with people who transition, but not everyone gets this opportunity. Not everyone gets this kind of connection with the other side. Why do you think did she ever explain to you why you two have this connection, and why does it happen to some and not happen to others?
Great question. Yes, we have, of course, talked about this. Lauren, when Lauren was still physical, was a therapist. She worked with young women with eating disorders. She also was and is a world-class intuitive. And she used to do readings for people. For anyone out there who lives with an intuitive, you know what I'm about to say here. It is a very, very interesting experience that takes some time, a while to get used to. We would sit and she would say, have you heard from your friend Michael in a while? And I said, no, I haven't heard from him in months. She said, he's about to call. And like 30 seconds later, the phone would ring and it would be Michael. We are both very spiritual beings, and we talked about this a lot. Lauren was very connected to Somewhere in Time. Lauren was 17 years younger than me. She now delights in the fact that she's almost 22 years younger than me. I keep getting older. She doesn't.
Good sense of humor.
We thought that I would be the one that would transition first. And that obviously wasn't going to be the case. But we both knew that we had been together, and Lauren channeled some of our previous lives. We knew that we had been together for a very long time, not every lifetime and not for every lifetime. We don't have the time today to go into all of the synchronicities that had to take place for Lauren and I to actually physically meet in this lifetime. We joked about it later, saying that our higher selves really deserved a vacation in Tahiti for pulling that off, because we met in a city that neither one of us had ever been to before. That story is in the book. We knew that this was our journey. It is our belief that we make these choices about our lifetimes. We make the choices about the soul groups that we incarnate and reincarnate with, which was one of James Redfield's big things in Celestine Prophecy. And we knew that we had spent a long time planning this lifetime, and that we would be together in this lifetime. Now, we did not know it was going to, at least consciously did not know it was going to be for a relatively short period of time. From the time I met Lauren to the time she transitioned was a little over 14 years. So we got those 14 years, which I'm incredibly grateful for. But we had no way of knowing consciously at that time that it was going to what was going to happen was going to happen. But we had memories and distinct memories of various lifetimes that we had spent together, at least little snapshots. I know that now Lauren obviously has access to all of that. But this was never like, oh, isn't this weird or something? This was us. Mm. This is like speaking English. If you're born in America, you learn to speak English. It's like an automatic thing. You get to be an adult, you speak English unless you learn another language. That's the best way that I can describe it, that we really knew that we'd had this before. And that is why that one night, Lauren said to me, write this all down. And she went into trance and we designed this afterlife experience. That was the way we wanted it to both to be. There's a wonderful writer whose name always slips my mind, and I wish I could remember it. I don't right now, because this line is absolutely not original with me. It's his. But he said, in the afterlife, we can choose islands of similar realities, which means that we can choose in our afterlife experience to be with others that share that in the unlimited, quote, space of the afterlife, that we can choose how that will be. You know, one of the things we talk about in the book, and I know this is controversial for a lot of people, and I don't say this in any way to be disrespectful, because I am a great believer in all of the major religions of the world. I mean, everybody has things in their religion and people in their religion that kind of take things perhaps maybe too far. But I have great respect for all the religions of the world. And as I have said to people, why is it that we think we have all these different beliefs, Buddhists, Christians, Muslims, people who believe in the Tao, people, I mean, all over the world, and there are various sects of everything else. We have all these different pathways to God and all these different definitions of God. How is it even reasonable to believe that when we do cross over, we cross over into only one reality from one specific religion? If we have all of these things in life, why is it not that case that if you're a Christian and you believe in Christian beliefs, your afterlife reflects that?
Right. There's a heaven and there's a hell and there's a this and a that and so
right.
on.
And that's beautiful and that's wonderful. But if you have these spiritual beliefs, somebody asked me about that one time. Well, you know, how can you describe that? And I thought of the great humorist, Will Rogers. At one point he was asked, you know, was he a member of any organized political party? And he said, no, I'm a Democrat. Now, now that could go for no, I'm a Republican too. Okay. So,
sure.
So, you know, it's the way I describe this to people is, you know, look, I can't really quite explain all of this to you, but sure, I know it was all meant. And I'll give you one other thing that we talked about a lot that, again, is not original with me. It comes from a spiritual teacher that I had at one point, which is in the afterlife. Picture this. You're between lives. You go out to a celestial running track and you start going around the track, setting up hurdles. Some are high, some are low, some are close together, some are not close together. And those are all of the experiences that you intend and your soul intends for you to have in your next lifetime. And you do it all the way around the track. Then you're born and you start running the track. And you get very irritated a lot at the idiot who set up the hurdles so close together and so high. This is what we felt, and what I now know is true, that everything about my life and everything about her life headed to this. It headed to us writing this book together, and it will eventually lead the two of us to have our reunion together. And I think one of the things that has done for our adult kids is that when the time comes that I do transition, and I have no reason to believe it's anytime soon, although it certainly could be, but I have no reason to believe that they will not. They'll miss me, but they won't be sad for me because they'll know I'll be with Lauren.
Stephen, it's such a beautiful story, and I really hope everybody gets out there and reads the book, and people who are going through this take this conversation and hopefully bring some sort of peace to them as well. I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all of my guests. What is your definition of living a good life?
Doing what I came here to do.
What is your definition of God?
Oh.
Just small stuff.
Oh, boy. I believe that there is an extraordinary power in the universe that I relate to as God, but I relate to that as God got us all that is. that it is not male, it is not female, it is all of the above, and it's the entire energy of the universe. I think now with this new telescope that we have up in space, and we are seeing the vastness of that space, seeing black holes being created, planets being spit out of those black holes, etc. The majesty of the eternity of space has to have been originally created by an extraordinary force, and in my own feeling, an extremely loving force. I believe that it's there. I think that the challenges that we have in life are not imposed upon us. They're things that we choose to experience, that our souls choose us to experience as we evolve from time to time. So it's very difficult for me to define God in a more specific way than that.
And where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing, where they can buy the book?
So whatdreamshavecome.com is our website. You'll get a brief description of the book and a link to Amazon where it is for sale, or you can just go to Amazon and look up What Dreams Have Come, and you can get the book there. And again, my email is stephen@whatdreamshavecome.com. If you want to share these experiences with me, I welcome you to do that. And I hope that we will provide the comfort for people that we have received from having written this book.
And is there any message that you would like to leave us with? Or that Lauren wants to leave us with?
We wish you love.
Stephen, thank you so much for being on the show. And thank you so much for sharing your experience, not only on the show, but in the book. And continued success in all your ventures in this life, my friend. Be well.
Thank you, buddy. It's been a lot of fun, Alex. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.